How's it going, everybody? So, I want to give my thoughts on the Platinum demo for Final Fantasy 15. Not really on its gameplay or anything like that, but more about its technology. This is technically a tech demo for the game, showing off the game's visuals and different aesthetics and lighting situations and things like that. And so I just wanted to kind of give like a quick analysis and my thoughts on the graphics so far, and then go in a little bit detail about what I think about the gameplay and, I guess how excited I am for this game to come out. So, this is the PlayStation 4 version we are watching, alright? And we have still a rendered resolution of 1600 by 900p, alright? That is then upscaled to 1080p. So, we still have a sub full HD resolution here, and I really hope to God that they can get that to 1080p, really, because there's quite a few issues that the 900p brings to this game that would just kind of keep it from being such a beautiful masterpiece. So as it stands, we still have a 1600 by 900 resolution, and things just look soft to some degree. Our frame rate is better than I think the episode Disguise demo, but it's still at 25 to 30 frames per second average. And although it targets 30 frames per second, we have a very fluctuant frame time going on here, which causes significant stuttering, and I'll get more into detail about that later on. All the textures seem really high quality. I didn't notice any, shimmering or anything like that, like low-res textures or stuff like that. Everything seemed really, really well done in terms of the texture quality. You also have some nice bloom effects and some of the best, I'll say, HDR lighting, high dynamic range lighting, and this creates such a cinematic, very well done scene, and makes everything just feel just incredible in terms of the visuals. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and say that some of the lighting in particular is just like extremely well done. It just really helps bring to life the whole scenery, and it makes it look just incredible, just absolutely amazing. So the lighting in particular is amazing, and great use of HDR lighting, and the bloom effects are fantastic. You also have cloth simulation in here, and that is affected by both the weather, so that's pretty cool, and wind and rain to be specific. So you'll see the cloth flapping around in the wind, and also the cloth will get wet, and there's a nice wet effect as well, which is pretty cool. You got really nice global illumination, which helps make the lighting and brings it kind of a more realistic tone to the scene, and light bounce, and it's all pretty cool. Also dynamic time of day with dynamic weather and clouds added to that. So really it just that kind of brings to life the whole scene. It kind of makes it seem a lot more realistic, and everything's great. Light shafts. There's also point light casted shadows from the sun, meaning that the shadows are completely dynamic. Depending on where the sun is located, the shadows will cast in different directions. You also have screen space ambient occlusion and screen space reflections, which kind of get the job done, but they're not that high quality, and to be honest, they're not that impressive. But they're relatively inexpensive. So I understand why they went with that. In fact, I do think that they need better ambient occlusion, because the ambient occlusion that they're currently using is just not strong enough. It kind of, some scenes look a little bit flat technically, and especially the scene where you're like I don't know, like a couple inches tall, and basically you're kind of moving around this environment, this large dining room, living room, or whatever. It just some scenes look a little bit bland without like a better ambient occlusion method, and the reflections, depending on where your camera is located, screen space reflections will cast reflections on water and things like that. But if you actually move your camera, the reflections will just disappear. So that's also something to take note. There's also nice subsurface scattering on the characters. That basically allows, when light penetrates the skin, it allows it to dissipate and basically make a much more realistic effect. You also have wind-affected particles, which are really nice. Dynamic depth of field. That is shallow. It's a shallow depth of field in free roam, and then it turns into a large depth of field when in combat. So that helps bring things in more in focus to what you're actually fighting for, and just creates a nice cinematic look. I know a lot of people have split decisions on depth of field, but I like it as an artistic effect. I think it really, helps bring out the scenery. The anisotropic filtering is high quality from what I can tell, but according to Digital Foundry with the episode The Sky demo, it actually, the game uses both trilinear filtering, which is just awful, and then there's a mix of like 8x or 16x anisotropic filtering on certain, I guess, certain surfaces. So I don't know if that's changed, but to be honest, I looked at the anisotropic filtering and it never bothered me. I never noticed really muddy textures, so I'm gonna just assume that it's fine. There's also physically based rendering, more specifically for the hair, and that really makes it look realistic and helps bring it out. So pretty freaking cool. So here's the issues that I can outline with the visuals in particular. These are the issues that I have, the top 5 issues, and then an issue of how to fix those issues, basically. My first issue is that we have severe aliasing. This is caused by the sub HD resolution, the sub full HD resolution, more specifically. When we have a 1600 by 900 resolution, and there's very poor anti-aliasing in place. In fact, I would even go as far to say that they have no anti-aliasing in place. It looks awful. In fact, it really does hurt the image quality. There's a lot of, jaggedness around the characters, around objects, a lot of flickering, a lot of shimmering. There's just, it really just kind of ruins the pristineness of the image almost. Unfortunately to say that, because on the surface it's a gorgeous game, but it's just brought down by a low resolution and practically no anti-aliasing methods. So severe aliasing, that's one. Number 2 is lots of shadow shimmering. The shadows are convincing in the fact that they actually look kind of good up close, but you can tell there's a lot of shadow popping in the distance, and the shadow quality isn't that well. It isn't, the shadow resolution rather isn't that high. There's a lot of shimmering around the shadows. You'll see lots of jaggedness and things around the shadows as well. And although in close proximity things look pretty good, from the distance there's a lot of shadow popping. And it just kind of, it's distracting at times, really, to be quite frank with you guys. It's distracting. That's issue number 2. Issue number 3 is bad pop-in. Now, this is to be expected in a large open-world game like this. But pop-in on this game is, I think they could, if they optimized it better, they could probably really make it better. But bad pop-in, really just for objects in particular, as well as shadows and grass and things like that, and other stuff coming up in the scenery. It can be pretty, again, distracting at times. You also have inconsistent frame timing, which can be the experience. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what frame timing is, it works in conjunction with frame rate. When you have great frame timing, basically what you have is a smooth, consistent, clean 30 frames per second update, meaning that when frames are delivered consistently, when you pan the camera around, you'll get a really nice, smooth, subtle, everything's perfectly fine, everything's really smooth, and it all just handles really nice. The problem is, because it's a VSync locked game, right? There's no screen tearing, it's VSync locked at 30 frames. When you get stutters to like 25, even below that, it creates stuttering and inconsistent frame time. So even though that the game may be saying, oh, it's 30 frames per second, it's stuttering the whole entire time. And that just makes it for a very just kind of crappy experience, to be quite honest. It can make the frame rate seem a lot worse than it is. And so when you have an inconsistent frame time like that, you really need to work on making sure it's a consistent, smooth, well updated 30 frames per second, because if it's not, you're going to have all this stuttering that's going on when in fact the frame rate's pretty smooth. So that's the thing. So they really need to nail down the frame timing. You generally want a 33 millisecond frame time update for 30 frames per second. So if they can nail that down with VSync, then it'll be a really nice, smooth experience. But that's where the game's suffering right now. Then lastly is no motion blur. Now, you guys know that I am one of those staunch critics against motion blur. I hate motion blur in terms of it being used like heavily. I do not like a heavy motion blur effect. But when you have a 30 frames per second game and you don't have motion blur, the stuttering is just amplified, again, with the inconsistent frame timing, and what you have is a really jittery mess, which is essentially what this game has. Even when the game is at 30 frames per second locked and all good, when you pan the camera around, you'll notice juddering. And normally what you would have with motion blur is that would smooth out the image, but you just don't have that here. And that's a huge problem. Again, it makes the frame rate seem a lot worse than it is. So how do we fix the aliasing? Simple. Upgrade the resolution to 1080p. For an anti-aliasing method, you use something like MLAA or something like TAA, something, cheap, inexpensive, something that just gets the job done. Hell, you can use FXAA if you want. I know a lot of people don't like FXAA because it blurs out objects, but this is a console experience we're talking about here, and I would rather have FXAA implemented than just nothing and see all these aliasing artifacts, at least something in there. So we need a 1080p upgrade in resolution. It would really help the aliasing and the image quality significantly, and then add like a cheap, inexpensive anti-aliasing option, again, like MLAA, temporal anti-aliasing, or FXAA, one of those. All right. How do we upgrade? How do we fix the shadow shimmering? That will somehow be fixed as well with the higher resolution upgrade of the game itself. But it would be nice to see slightly higher resolution shadows if they could optimize it and really pull that off. It may be too expensive to ask for. It may drag the frame rate down. But I think if they can optimize it and they can pull that off, it would really go a long way in helping the game, making the game feel a lot more, realistic and not as distracting. Bad pop-in, how do we fix this? Pretty simple, just optimize it for, a better view distance. It doesn't need to be significantly far, we don't need to see tens of thousands of miles down the road of just nothing but rendered grass and things. That's obviously not going to happen, I understand, but I still think it needs to be done slightly better to some degree, and just bring the view distance up slightly. It would really work well. Something you can also do is intensify the depth of field effect to the point where it's really blurred out in the distance and you can really hide pop-in. And that's why depth of field is a really great artistic effect for an open world game like this, is because you can hide the pop-in in the far distances, and you can create this nice artistic subtle effect that's in place. And I think if they could amplify the depth of field effect to the point where, okay, it's amplified to the point where it shows you what's in close proximity to yourself, but it hides the pop-in that's, X amount of distance away from you. I think that could really, really create a nice looking game. It could hide the pop-in to some degree. Sure, you would still be able to see it, but still, it would look nice. And inconsistent frame timing, pretty simple. Just VSync and get 30 frames per second consistently. If there's any dips below that, it's going to cause an inconsistent frame time, and you're going to get much more judderness than you should be, basically. Just optimize the game, get a VSync, lock 30 frames per second consistently. And with a game like this, with all these effects going on, although it's hard, it really needs it. This is a game that needs a high frame rate, it needs a consistent frame rate. And if we're not going to get a PC version anytime soon, then you really need to nail down the console version. All right, no motion blur. Add it. You need motion blur for this. I'm sorry. There's zero motion blur. You need camera and object-based motion blur. This will allow things to look a lot more smoothly. So get those things done. And I think what we really have at the very end, if they were able to implement all of that, again, a higher resolution, better shadows, optimized view distance, or better depth of field to hide it, a VSync lock 30 frames per second, and object and camera-based motion blur, we would have a very, very nice experience here. On the surface, it is a really good looking game, but there's just some things that quite just hold it back, like those things. There's also now that I mention it, there's no night shadows at all, which kind of sucks because some scenes look bland at night. You'll notice, like, at night, there's certain shadows that should be casted not only around like objects but around Noctis himself, and there are none. There's no night shadows, which kind of make things feel a little bit bland. So anyway, those are just my thoughts on the visuals so far. I think what we have is a very impressive looking game that's ultimately just held back by console hardware. This is why I can really wish the game would come to PC, because this is the type of game where it would really showcase all the beauty and stuff on a really powerful rig. But maybe down in the future, they said at the moment we're basically just getting a console version of the game, and hopefully it does come to PC in the future. But as it stands, I'm getting this game on PS4. I actually pre-ordered the Ultimate Edition of the game. Yes, the very expensive collector's edition that you can't even get anymore. It's sold out within like the first half an hour of it going live. I'm really excited for the game, and even though I'm a new Final Fantasy fan, technically, well, I don't really call myself a fan, but I'm new to the whole Final Fantasy thing. I only played Final Fantasy 13. Wasn't too amazed by it, but I did like the beauty of the game's art style and things like that. But this game looks tremendous so far. I like the change in gameplay. Really looking forward to it, and looking forward to getting my hands on the collector's edition when it comes out and doing an unboxing for you guys as well as gameplay. This game looks to want to have, syncing up tons of hours in our lives, so it's going to be fantastic. Hopefully it's going to be fantastic. It already looks pretty fantastic. So those are my thoughts, guys, on the graphics. Let me know what you guys think. I'm enjoying the game. I'm enjoying the demo, and looking forward to playing more of it when it comes out. I'll see you guys then. Have a good one.